All right, this is a housing rebuttal to Joe Biden's infrastructure speech. You probably know that the infrastructure bill did recently pass the House, and Joe Biden decided to do a speech to celebrate what he is calling Infrastructure Week. That's W-E-E-K. So this video is in anticipation of the upcoming Housing Revolution video series that will be debuting on Wednesday, December 1st. I hope you'll watch out for that. I hit the notifications tab and all that kind of stuff. So in this speech, Joe Biden, even though he wasn't talking about housing, if he did, I missed it, but he did give some ample material to highlight the widespread effects of our dysfunctional and hyperinflationary land and housing system. He also gave some ample material to highlight or lowlight our politicians' collective apathy when it comes to addressing our housing crisis, and their inability and complete lack of desire to get to the deepest systemic roots of our housing crisis, much less come up with some effective solutions. So anyways, here it is, some select excerpts from Joe Biden's Infrastructure Week speech.
And it puts us on a path to win the economic competition of the 21st century that we face with China and other large countries and the rest of the world. It'll get America off the sidelines on manufacturing of solar panels, wind turbines, battery storage, energy and power for electric vehicles, from school buses to automobiles.
So I don't know what qualifies in Joe Biden's mind as winning the economic competition, but I just don't see how that can happen without first winning the manufacturing competition, or at least being able to hold our own ground there. And we are not about to win any manufacturing competition with China. And it's not because we don't have the smarts, it's because we cannot produce goods as inexpensively as they can. Why is that? Because our wages are so much higher. And why are our wages so much higher? Because employers have to pay employees wages that are high enough that employees can then afford to pay our much higher cost of living. Chief among them, our inflated and hyperinflated land and housing costs. It's just another example of the broad web of negative effects our dysfunctional and hyperinflationary land and housing system has on our everyday lives and our economy. And until we finally get around to addressing that, we are not going to be winning any manufacturing competition with China or a whole host of other countries, whether you're talking about manufacturing exports or manufacturing goods for domestic consumption. It ain't going to happen. And if we are truly serious about competing economically and competing as a manufacturer, somewhere along the line, we have to stop and effectively and comprehensively address our ongoing and seemingly permanent affordable housing crisis. Next.
The tax cuts for working people and the middle class so that folks have just a little, I know you're tired of hearing me say, my dad used to always say, as a middle class guy, we just need a little breathing room,
Yeah, that is just so sweet. You're going to take the working people and the middle class people and save them some money and give them a little breathing room. Until the landlords and real estate investors get wind of this, which obviously won't take long, and proceed to raise their rents and sales prices accordingly. There's a reason these people are often referred to as land sharks. Just like real sharks can smell blood from miles away, real estate investors and landlords can smell loose change from miles away. And when you have a broad, sweeping program like this that's going to get these savings out to almost everyone, this is going to be a bloodbath. The people controlling land and housing are going to raise their rents and their sales prices ASAP. But why would they do such a thing? Well, because they can. This is what they do. And there's nothing stopping them. Our dysfunctional, hyperinflationary land and housing system not only enables them to do so, it encourages them to do so. And meanwhile, the people in our government are just sitting around acting helpless and dumb and saying things like, well, that's just the way the market works. But yeah, anyways, these savings that the president is touting are going to give the people a little breathing room for a very little window of time. The land sharks, who are the top predators at the top of the economic food chain, are going to make sure of that. Next.
It's going to create more jobs, good paying jobs, union jobs that can't be outsourced,
Ooh. Now, this one has landlords, real estate investors, house flippers, mortgage banks, etc., panting and frothing at the mouth. They are perched, poised, and ready to pounce on those wage increases and take and devour what they are rightly entitled to. Yes, these wage increases will be in and out of workers' pockets and into the pockets of those controlling housing before you can say the sausage is made. This, in turn, will drive housing's market rate up, which will, in turn, provide an acceptable alibi for those real estate investors and landlords who actually have a conscience to go ahead then and raise their rents and sales prices also. Well, market rate went up, so we had to raise your rent, which, of course, will take housing's market rate and drive it up even more, etc.
The sausage is made.
Now, don't get me going on the whole sausage thing. You really do not want to hear my sausage story, but, well, unless you're one of those people that has chronic low energy and craves sweets all the time, then yeah, you might want to hear my sausage story. But I think we'll just save that for another time.
It's going to reduce child poverty in this country, by the way, by 50%. We're already on track to do that with the child tax credit we passed in our last piece of legislation.
All together now, until the people controlling land and housing raise their rent and sales prices. And it won't take long.
You know, and according to economists, this is going to be ease inflationary pressure, not increase it, ease inflationary pressures by lowering costs for working families.
You know, I just love this wording they're using. We are going to ease inflationary pressures. We're not going to do anything about inflation itself. We're just going to make it a little easier for you to pay for inflation, at least for a little while, because the very act in itself is inflationary and is going to push inflation even higher, eventually making it even more burdensome than it was in the first place. Unless, of course, you are one of those people profiteering off inflation, like those controlling land and housing. But hey, check it out. There's even more. They got a letter out of the blue.
We got out of the blue a couple weeks ago a letter from 17 Nobel Prize winners in economics, and they determined that it will ease inflationary pressures, not create them, ease them, ease those pressures.
Economic Nobel Prize winners. A more fitting moniker would be economic status quo preserving economists, whose job is to justify the system as it is, to make sure the system keeps going as it is, and above all else, to ensure that the people at the top remain at the top.
For much too long, working people and the middle class of this country have been dealt out of the promise of America. That sounds like hyperbole, but I really mean it. And it will reward companies for paying good wages and for getting materials for their products from right here in America.
The first thing people say is employers need to pay employees higher wages. And I get that. I'm on the one hand, I'm on board with that, and I understand it. Wages have not kept up with production and all of that. But as a realist, I see the futility of that. Because the system is as it is, it doesn't matter. These across-the-board wage increases are highly inflationary, with the lion's share of these wage increases ending up in the pockets of those controlling land and housing, whether they're landlords, real estate corporations, house flippers, mortgage banks, or whatever. That's just the way our dysfunctional housing system works. Now, if just a few of you out there had wage increases, well, that's not inflationary. And yes, that's going to benefit you. But that's not the way it's working. As we've seen, every time we've raised a minimum wage, we're back at the table in a few years begging for another wage increase. Why? Because the people controlling land and housing raised their rents and raised their sales prices. And until we just stop and effectively address and comprehensively transform our dysfunctional, hyperinflationary land and housing system, nothing is going to change. The cycle's just going to go on and on and on and on.
And they're going to transform our transportation system with the most significant investments in passenger rail, the most significant investment in 50 years, in roads and bridges, the most significant investment in 70 years, and more investment in public transit than we've ever made, period. It's going to modernize our ports and our airports. I'm going to be going to some of our ports next week. And the freight rail, increasing that as a reason. I mean, look, we have bottlenecks across the country. We're doing so much with this legislation. It's going to make it easier for companies to get goods to market more quickly and reduce supply chains, bottlenecks, and for decades to come.
So, hey, don't get me wrong. I am all in for infrastructure. It's one of the best uses of credit, where the benefits to society and the economy of that which is going to be produced vastly outweighs the negatives of the inflation thereby created. I'm all in for that. The big problem is with all this talk about winning the economic competition with China, about giving working people and middle-class people a little breathing room, about easing inflationary pressures, about this whole case they're trying to make that they're going to improve the financial lives of everyday Americans. It's a bunch of sausage where, it tastes really good for a few minutes and then wreaks havoc from there on. I mean, even Biden doesn't believe it. Check out this last clip.
I truly believe that 50 years from now, folks are going to look back and say, this was the moment, this was the period, this year and the next couple of years, when America decided to win the competition of the 21st century.
I truly believe he knows we are not dealing with the root problems. And until we do, until we effectively and comprehensively transform our dysfunctional, hyperinflationary land and housing system by its roots, the financial lives of everyday average Americans aren't going to change either.
I make no apologies for it.
All right, that's a wrap on a housing rebuttal to Joe Biden's Infrastructure Week speech. On Wednesday, December 1st, we will be debuting the first episode of Housing Revolution. This is a video series that will break down our land and housing system like you've never seen before. We will expose the inevitability of the system's current state of dysfunction. We will talk about what actions must be taken if we are to permanently transform this sordid system into a system that effectively, equitably, and affordably houses everyone. So keep an eye out for that. In the meantime, share, subscribe, hit the notifications tab, blah, 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 blah. All right, thanks for being here. See you soon. Over and out.